The Israelites have been eyewitnesses of God's supernatural signs. They'd seen the plagues in Egypt. They'd seen Moses standing up there holding out his staff and the waters of the Red Sea part. And so all these things that they'd seen the manna, they'd seen the quail, they'd seen water, they'd seen all these things that were going on. And yet, they still doubted God's power. How powerful is God?
No way to measure.
Powerful.
No limit.
There's no limit. A God that can fling the stars in the heavens. Now, to me, that is just, Verse 12 and 13, God had a solution for Israel's lack of faith. He would destroy them. And then Moses would be the foundation of a great and stronger nation. Moses urged God to stay his judgment. He understood his role as an intercessor, and this wasn't the first time he had taken on that task. And you can go back and look at Numbers 11, 1, 2, and Numbers 12, 1 through 16. He respectfully appealed to God's reputation as a reason for mercy. And one of the things that I can't get in my mind here is, God had to, how do I say this? He had the desire to destroy them, and yet that intercessory prayer is what saved the people of Israel. At least that's what I read in the text in there, is that Moses' prayer before God and his discussion with God said, God, did you think about this? All these people from Egypt are going to hear what's happened to these people out here. If you destroy them on the plague, in verse 14, the Egyptians experienced God's power firsthand. Other nations knew the stories because word had spread through the grapevine of, these Israelites. They got some kind of special God that, you don't want to mess with them. They would know that he had led them. Verse 15 and 16 talks about, but if God wiped out Israel and left none alive, it would also affect how the nations viewed him. Moses suggested that Egypt would twist the narrative from God who led his people out of bondage to one who couldn't deliver them to the promised land. How would you have felt if you were in Moses' situation?
One thing I think about though is God already knew what Moses was going to say when he told him about the plague.
And
So,
God already knew he wasn't going to break that promise.
So was that a test to Moses to see what?
See if Moses would say, well, go ahead.
It was.
Go ahead, Lord. You can make me a great nation. Look at me. I'm Moses,
Yeah, I agree with David.
I had that thought when I was reading, of course this, and, it's here to help us understand, but what was it that, God was accomplishing here?
Well, it took a lot of strength for Moses to confront, I guess you'd say, God.
With people not, with the real rebellion,
Right. He was like standing there by himself.
Yeah, exactly.
What I don't understand is after they saw the parting of the Red Sea, how could they ever doubt anything he ever told them? I mean, how does he blindly go? Let's go. That's what it said. Let's go.
I mean,
Yeah,
eventually,
exactly. I mean, come on, people.
eventually they sort of forget things and they think, oh, me,
They come to
and
expect.
and, you know, it's what we do.
Yeah.
I'm the same way. I forget what he did, and I'm like, oh, I gotta do this. Well, no, I can't do it.
That's just like after 911, the churches were full of people.
Right.
Where are they now?
This falls back to what Moses has done. He's put his wisdom into what we need to do. God tells us to gain wisdom every day. What all Moses has done been through, he's wise enough to start thinking. God is almost as us as human, and he's going off. He's getting his thing right here, and Moses is thinking. We've been through all kinds of situations, and this has brought us to it, so he used his wisdom, and we're supposed to be gaining wisdom. So he set forward, this is what we need to do. We gotta go forth and show them that this is what God said.
All right, let's move on to our next section. We're running real late here. God's glory. Let me read that.
Now may the Lord's strength be displayed just as you have declared. The Lord is slow to anger, abounding in love, and forgiving sin and rebellion. Yet he does not leave the guilty unpunished. He punishes the children for the sin of the parents to the third and fourth generation. In accordance with your great love, forgive the sin of these people just as you have pardoned them from the time they left Egypt until now.
Okay. And in the King James Version it says, and now I beseech thee, let the power of my Lord be great, according as thou hast spoken, saying, the Lord is long suffering and of great mercy, forgiving iniquity and transgression, and by no means clearing guilty, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children unto the third and fourth generation. Pardon, I beseech thee, the iniquity of this people, according to the greatness of thy mercy, and as thou hast forgiven this people from Egypt even until now. You know, Moses is, having this conversation with God, and, God is saying, now often occurs when speakers are getting to the bottom line of what they wish to say. Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, used it when he exhorted Moses to appoint them who could help lead the people. That's from Exodus 18:19. Joshua used it at the end of his final speech as he called the people to fear the Lord and to choose him above all other gods. That's from Joshua 24:14. Naomi used it when she advised Ruth how to speak with Boaz, her kinsman redeemer. That's from Ruth 3:2. In each of these situations, the speakers addressed their topic as they exhorted their listeners to action. In verse 13 through 16, Moses had expressed his concern that if God destroyed his people, the neighboring people who heard of it would think less of his power. His desire was rooted in God's glory and based on his desire that the Lord's strength be displayed. Verse 18 talks about abounding in love is the word hesed, which occurs about 250 times in the Old Testament. This rich word has many translations, including loving kindness, goodness, loyalty, and favor. For example, the word appears in every verse of Psalms 136. His love endures forever. Moses is, he's with God, and God's going to show his great power. The scriptures tell us that God, Hesed, is abundant from Psalms 103:8, great in every extent, 57:10, good in 69:16, and everlasting in 100:5. The word sin, awan, is a strong word that denotes serious disobedience. It also can be translated as guilt or designating the punishment such as transgression deserves. God judged Cain for killing Abel. Cain stated that his punishment, awan, was too much to bear. While God will forgive our disobedience, he will not wink at sin or look the other way. A prior generation's iniquity can resonate to later generations like a rod, creating concentric circles of a pond. You know, that sin radiates out through the family. Have you ever seen somebody that, let's say they were, you know, alcohol, and you see that tendency pass because they saw their father do it, and then they took that up, and then the next generation saw their father do it. So it gets passed on down, and that unhealthy behavior follows that line and that lineage. And that's kind of what that's indicating here is, you know, whenever there's a sin, then, and even I think if you go and start looking at, you know, David's sin with Bathsheba, God gave him some repercussions from that sin. He didn't get away scot-free. You know, there were people trying to sell his son. One of his sons was killed. The baby died. You know, there are other things that happened in his life that were because of that sin. Verse 19, the Hebrew word for forgive, S-A-L-A-C-H, denotes a pardon or the setting aside of punishment due for sin. It signifies mercy that only comes from God. God showed great love and forgiveness toward Israel throughout the Exodus and their time in the wilderness. The Bible affirms that God still stands ready to pardon those who seek Him. One of the main things that we have that they didn't have is we have Jesus. He came and took that burden of sin. That burden of sin, we get free pardon. You hot too, Miss Candy? I am. Somebody crank this thing up, please.
Sometimes I think it's just me.
I'm hot too, so could be where I'm drinking hot coffee, but you know, the warm coffee.
We're showing 70. They may have turned it up and they turned it up.
You got that room that gets
All
cold,
them
and this room gets
The
hot.
old people over there got cold.
Maybe we need to swap rooms with them.
They turned it back up. They
Uh,
were sitting on 70.
if I had you to write down or think about a phrase that represents time that you recognize God's patience and love towards you.
Here's one sitting over there now.
Nobody got anything?
Say that again now.
A time, a phrase that represents a time you recognize God's patience and love towards you.
Yesterday, the day before, the day after that, and whatever.
Yeah, every day.
Every
He's
day.
definitely got patience with me.
He certainly has patience with me.
When we get off, you know, we get the something called the belly grubs, you know, we get all down and don't want to, you know, I'm just tired. I don't want to do anything. I'm so tired of doing church and going to church and, you know, hearing sermons. I am just so tired of it. And then, you know, you realize that that's where your strength comes from, is coming to church, being with fellow believers, you know, drawing strength from them. And when you've got a problem, you've got a brother or sister that you can go and talk to about that problem. And those problems are may be small to you, but it's still a problem. And we were talking earlier about guidance. You know, sometimes when you got a good godly friend, you can go to them and say, hey, I'm thinking about doing thus and such. And they may tell you, well, you're crazy, or, you know, they may say, you know, well, I think you ought to do this. I think Brother Dave laughed and he tells me I'm crazy for doing hay, but, you know,
pray for you about it.
Well, I tell you, through the experience here lately, I'm surprised at a lot of people that have been able to give me some advice, just like my daughter out on the job, come up and say, we can do this. We're looking at contemplating all this and what we're gonna do the hardest and all, so that she comes up with a quick answer, and it makes everything simple and easy, and we do it. And listening to her, sometimes when you're trying to tell that other person they didn't need to get involved in it, you let them go ahead and speak their mind, and you gotta